Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted and honored to be your host for Choice, Your Creative Superpower. Coming to you from Oakland, California, each Thursday at 12 noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. We are here to explore how wielding your superpower for the greatest good can co-create a life experience that is most fulfilling. For those of you coming back, it's great to see you here again. And if this is your first time, welcome, and thank you for tuning in. Hello, Shay. Good to see you. I am a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, and I'm also a transformational coach. My ministry as a practitioner and my mission as a coach are to help people live their lives to the fullest. Today, in episode 64, we'll be exploring the relationship between choice and work. Now, just to be clear, when I'm saying work, what I'm speaking of is what one is employed to do for which they receive a salary. Now, of course, there is a possibility that their primary role is one for which they aren't given a salary. For example, a person who's volunteering, or someone doing pro bono work, or stay-at-home mom or dad. Right? People are all working. But I'm going to handle those bits separately because the relationship between choice and work is going to be somewhat different. So let's start with a very obvious connection. How work affects finances. The work you do will usually determine how much you earn, which in turn either opens up financial possibilities for you, or it puts limitations on your options. For example, based solely on earned income and other job-related compensation, a corporate CEO, or CIO for that matter, of a Fortune 500 company has far more financial opportunities than a cashier at a fast food restaurant. While few of us would ever be given the choice between these very distant points on the earning spectrum, well, you want to be a CEO or you want to just kind of deal with the fast food restaurant? I don't think that we really would want to choose getting less, but it's not at all uncommon to choose work that doesn't pay well in order to do the kind of work that resonates with you the most. Very important. All right. So one of the things that we know about our work is that it's not necessarily about the money. I had a very lucrative corporate gig, and I chose to follow my calling for coaching others in their quest for a better life experience. Started off as a personal trainer, and then a performance coach, then a health and wellness coach, a transformational coach, and a spiritual advisor. None of these paid as well as my corporate jobs, but each one of these has been a step forward in my calling, bringing me a far greater sense of fulfillment and abundance than any of the highly paying jobs. And bonus, I'm able to be in service to others each and every day. Talk about your win-win scenarios. Now, I don't want to focus too strongly on the financial choices that flow from your choice of work, but I will add that we often choose a specific type of work because it's a prerequisite to a particular career we have chosen to pursue. So our choice of work can make a very big difference for how we can advance, what we can advance to. What we choose to do for work can also determine where we're going to choose to live. I have a number of friends who are actors and entertainers, and their chosen professions often dictate very specific places where they're more likely to find the jobs that they want. Excuse me. Our choice of work can have a big impact on our relationships. Ask anyone who has been working in an office prior to the pandemic and now works from home just how much their relationships have changed. You'll hear all sorts of responses, from feeling the loss of community and missing physical interactions to the enjoyment of not having to commute and getting to spend more time with one's family, and every possible variation in between. Likewise, if you choose to work, let's say on an oil rig out in the middle of the ocean, or you're an entertainer on a cruise ship, types of relationships that you can form and maintain most certainly change. Your choice of work can have a huge impact on your physical or emotional well-being. Whether we're talking about the dangers of working in a mine deep below the surface, or being a police officer facing potential dangers literally every day, whether you're a therapist or a counselor addressing a client's intense personal issues, or if you're a test pilot, there's the ever-present danger and stress that comes with that job. Or let's get down to earth and simply being in a sales environment where, as far as the company that employs you is concerned, you're really only as good, so to speak, as your last sale. Depending on what stressors come with the job, the choices that one makes may be to counteract and alleviate that stress, or they might be adversely affected and limited by that stress. As always, part of the process of making an effective choice lies with understanding why we have chosen a particular action or path, and allowing that knowledge to inform our choices. So we might decide that we need to take a particular job because it's expedient and it'll deal with what we need to deal with right up front. We might take a job that we know is going to pay off sometime down the line, so it's worth putting in those initial efforts. But many questions do come up, though. For example, how satisfied are you with the work that you're doing? Well, if you are satisfied, you're likely to choose steps that would enable you to succeed and progress. If you're dissatisfied, however, your choices might be geared more towards getting a different job, or maybe getting additional education or some additional training. Or you might, unfortunately, even find yourself retreating into a deep funk and just kind of remaining entrenched in an unappealing state of mind and spirit. If you do find yourself in that predicament, please do not give up hope. I'll invite you to remember to focus on abundance and allow yourself to be open to possibilities which might never have occurred to you. Do whatever you can to cast your job search net as wide and as far as possible. Sometimes it's not the work itself that's problematic, but the amount of time and energy that it takes to perform the job well. One of the things that has been bandied about quite a bit over the years is the idea of work-life balance. And we know that that has an enormous effect on our life experience in so many ways. Choosing to find ways to mitigate an imbalance, or choosing to find ways to deal with the consequences of not being able to do so, or even being unwilling to do so. All of those bring about very different choices. But the point here is they are choices. All right. So you want to be as aware as possible of when you do indeed come to what's called a choice point, an opportunity to make a choice. As we've seen, we've seen this so many times, there are combinations of circumstances and choices that tend to either encourage or impede what we've chosen to do. We call these missteps sometimes. Or we call them progress, or we call them regression, depending on which way we're headed. But each of them has an opportunity to provide something of value, right? Because each of them provides additional information. Either, yes, stay on this path, this is where you want to be, or no, you have some work to do. But there's information there. So clearly, what we choose to do for a living, or what we need to do for a living, has very significant effects on our choices. So now I want to kind of switch things around. And I want to look at the ways that our choices affect our work. Years ago, I remember this comedian saying, was asking this question, he said, do you know why we always ask children what they want to be when they grow up? And then her response was, because we are looking for ideas. Sometimes I think that's true. Well, comedy aside, let me address what I believe to be a ginormous elephant in the room. And that is that question, do you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, why would you ask a terrible question like that? All right. I mean, it's equating one's identity with one's work. And if you watched our episode on identity, you'll recall that while it's not uncommon for people to identify themselves by their job, I'm a doctor, I'm a firefighter, I'm an electrician, I'm a cashier, I'm a football player. Right? Identifying yourself by your job can be a terrible idea in many cases, if not in most cases, unless what you do is in alignment with your passions, your values, your sense of purpose, and it's something you can continue to do regardless of circumstances or conditions. Well, what are you if you can't perform that role with which you've identified yourself? So let's go back to asking that question of a child. What child has any idea what they would want to do when they grow up? Personally, I think the best answer I've ever heard from a child who was asked that question was, I want to be bigger. My second favorite was, I want to be older. Even asking the question in a more appropriate way by saying, for example, not, what do you want to do, but what do you want to be, Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a cowboy until I actually got to spend some time around horses and cows, and I realized, bad idea. Very much a city boy. But we continue thinking far beyond childhood about what we want to do in our life, what we want to do for work. And many people struggle with this question quite a bit. When I was doing some research for this topic, I was looking at studies on job satisfaction in the United States. It produced some really interesting statistics. For example, 49% of American workers report being very satisfied with their work, while 30% are merely somewhat satisfied. 61% of American employees want to leave their current jobs in 2023. That's a huge percentage. And as big as that percentage is, studies also note that only 20% are passionate about their jobs. Just 20%. Perhaps Eric Butterworth's advice from his book, Spiritual Economics, can help us a bit here. Let me bring this up. He says, remember, consciousness is the key. Make a new commitment to think of your work not as a place to make a living, but as an opportunity to make a life. Think of yourself as a channel through which creative activities flow, and there is no limit. Consciousness is the key. Thinking of not making a living, but having an opportunity to make a life. Brilliant. So, not surprisingly, once again, mindset provides an approach to consider. Take this down. There we go. When you get right down to it, folks, whether we're talking to young children, we're talking to new graduates, we're talking to adults, who you are in the world, right? How you show up in the world is far more important than what you do for work. So choose to recognize your personal values. Choose to discover your passions. Choose to understand your purpose. And for those of you who look at the idea of purpose and say, well, I have a lot of different purposes, that's fine. It doesn't have to be this one singular thing. Okay. Let the information that you gather about your values, your passions, your purpose, let that inform your choices as best they can. But bear in mind, your work will not necessarily align with all three of those, and that's perfectly fine, and it's quite common. There's no reason why what you do to earn a salary needs to necessarily address your passions. Eric Butterworth suggests your salary can provide for pursuing your passions. It's not uncommon, for example, for actors to take tried and true roles, maybe even things that they wish they had no longer had to do, but they'll take them purely so that they can bankroll a creative project that speaks to their values, speaks to their passions. It's a means to an end. On the other hand, if your personal values and your work are at odds with one another, that's a likely stressor and one to avoid or remedy as best you can and as soon as you can. Accepting a job that doesn't speak to your passions, but allows you to pursue them, is infinitely better than taking a job doing something that you find to be morally unacceptable. Do we sometimes find ourselves in that predicament? Unfortunately, yes. But, it would be counterproductive to pretend otherwise. So what choice do we have? All right. Well, we can work through, we can choose to work towards finding an alternative without self-criticism, without recriminations. What if we're being asked to do something that's illegal or completely unacceptable to us? Under those circumstances, we might very well choose to leave that job, do what we can to find another opportunity, and quite honestly, if it's appropriate, even notify the proper authorities. Because if we can prevent something that is wrong from being perpetuated, we've brought more goodness into the world. And frankly, I just don't see how any amount of money can overcome legal or moral imperatives. We often speak of workplace culture. But it's important to consider that every employee has the ability to shape that culture. It becomes kind of commonplace to think of the company's culture as being dictated by management. But you really can't dictate culture. Oh, you can say these are our processes and these are our procedures and such. But you can't dictate culture, because culture grows out of the cumulative actions and reactions between management and the workforce, between employees and customers, even between employees and employees. I like to think of culture the same way I think of climate. While weather refers to short-term atmospheric changes, climate refers to long-term changes over longer periods of time. Now, I mention this because culture neither comes into existence nor changes quickly. It takes time. It takes repetition. It takes buy-in. It takes being able to show the value in that culture. Recognizing that you have the opportunity to choose to contribute to what that culture is and to shape that culture can make a workplace far more harmonious. All right, might take a while. Remember, culture is analogous to climate, not weather. But it is so worth the effort. Speaking of shaping your work experience, there are often many choices that you can make to do so. For example, you're interested in a career, not just a job. So choosing to stand out as a strong contributor, as a visionary, as a great problem solver, what have you, whatever would be more appropriate for the position you're looking at. That can pave the way for advancement. Similarly, how one chooses to act and interact with one's peers, with any staff that might report to you, and management to whom you report. It will often be noticed, and clearly we want that to work for us, not against us. So, do you choose to collaborate? Do you choose to avoid unnecessary conflicts, to resolve conflicts amiably when they do arise? And they will arise. I mean, we're people. We each have our own opinions and our own perspectives. Do you choose to extend the same courtesy to all? Not just a select few, your friends and the folks that you feel can do something for you, but for everyone. Do you choose to be open to other people's opinions and other people's perspectives? Do you choose to lead rather than to manage people? Great leader is far more important than a great manager. When called upon to do so, do you choose to excel at teamwork? When situations and circumstances change, and they will change, do you choose to be adaptable? I told you there's a lot of choice points to consider. But I want to return to the idea of work where one might be volunteering, or one where there isn't any pay, such as for a stay-at-home parent or caregiver. For the work one does as a volunteer to be truly productive and the best use of one's time and attention, choose to do what resonates with you. Volunteering to do a job or a task that you don't want, folks, that's just going to wear you down. It's not going to provide a sense of truly being in service, and it might not allow you to bring your best to the task at hand. Remember, your no leaves room for someone else's yes. Now, the work one does as a caregiver, okay, can be challenging. It can be frustrating. It can be complicated. But it's also an opportunity to serve in a way that is sacred and profound. Choose to approach that role as a gift. It's a connection. It's a way to guide and guard someone through difficult times. See it as that gift rather than a chore or an obligation. I know how difficult it can be at times. Been there. But I also know how much it can mean to the recipient of that loving care. And speaking of recipients to loving care, choose to take care of yourself as well. Now, I know I used this slide last week, but I'm going to use it again because it is absolutely valid. All right. The number of caregivers who forget how important it is to first take care of themselves is staggering. Choose to ask for help when needed. Choose to find a way to take a break when needed. Choose to recognize that each of us has their own unique and personal path to walk. And bear in mind, what might seem to be the best approach, the best solution in your mind, might actually not be the greatest good for the other person. Lastly, choose to stay well connected to loving spirit. There is nothing we need to work through alone. We are always connected through and to loving spirit. Well, I think that's going to do it for today, folks. If you would like to explore choice and work a little bit further, or if there is something that you would like to suggest as a topic for an upcoming show, by all means, do reach out to me. You can do so here at zodemuro@gmail.com. Okay, you can connect with me for practitioner sessions or coaching, discussion, or prayer. I'd be more than happy to speak with you. Oh, you're very welcome, Shay. All right. So, in addition to considering what you might need along your spiritual journey, I would offer you some resources. And the resources I'll offer to you are right here on New Thought Media Network. Okay. So go to ntmedia.org and see the more than 40 hours of programming that's available. Let me give you some ideas just for today. 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Finding the Joy in the Journey is presented by most delightful Reverend Gina Calvario Krupka. Today, her very special guests are Rev Melissa and Rev Z. Wow, that's a great duo. Strongly recommend checking that out. 2 p.m. Mountain Time. The Vibrant Living Hour with Practitioner Ken Ludwig. 4 p.m. Mountain Time. There's the Spiritual Toolkit presented by Reverend Brock Ford. And folks, if it is possible for you to do so, go to ntmedia.org/donate. Help us make this a world that works for everyone. Because we want to spread the joy of New Thought as far and as wide as possible. So I look forward to seeing you again next week. Until we meet again, choose well, choose wisely, and know that you are loved. Namaste.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro.